Muslims believe that jinn exist, not like genie from Aladdin. It's a lot more complicated than that. But basically, they can do good or bad. They can go to heaven and hell. They get judged by God the same way. And essentially, they are like their own beings that live parallel lives to us humans. And I always thought it was interesting because animals, like cats, are notorious for being able to see jinn. All animals can see jinn, but for some reason, humans can't. Like sometimes they'll make themselves known or whatever, but for the most part, we just can't see them. And I asked my dad about this. I was like, Dad, why can't humans see jinn? It just feels kind of unfair. And he was like, honey, our brains would not be able to comprehend seeing jinn. It would just be too much for us to handle. Like think of the concept of infinity, right? Like our brains can't even comprehend that. So there's no way our brains could handle seeing jinn. And I was like, that feels like a cop-out. I mean, come on. What do you mean like my brain can't handle it? In any case, the other day I was sitting and minding my own business when all of a sudden I thought about breathing as a concept, and I thought about it so hard that I forgot how to breathe. So maybe my dad was right.
This spooky scary story time takes place in a small village in Bosnia, and the person who sent me this story said that the village is filled with people who practice all kinds of spirituality. There's dark witches, there's light witches, people dance around fires, and sometimes the supernatural is as vivid as reality. The person who sent me this story said that one night their grandfather went to the pub and sadly found another woman he was attracted to. The thing was, he was already married with the person's grandmother at home and 4 small children. But her grandfather brings this new woman home as his new bride. She says she knows it's strange, but in their village it wasn't that uncommon. Nevertheless, her grandmother accepts her fate and takes her and her small children away while her grandfather gets his act together. She says the woman that her grandfather would go on to lay with and pretend like he was married to was actually a dark witch in their village. She said she had a strange presence, and an evil one at that. She would go out to milk the cows at night and they would bleed right through. She would burn his belongings at night and dance around a fire, and she said that her grandmother assumed she did this as a sort of ritual. She said no one in the village knew this woman. She was a stranger, but there were only about 7 houses in the village and it was pretty isolated, so no one really knew where she came from. Her grandmother ultimately gives her grandfather an ultimatum and says, you either pick me or her, you can't have both. He chose her grandmother. So the woman leaves, she storms off, but she's mad at him. And not long after she leaves, they start finding dead animals all around their property. Her uncle, who was a small child at the time, became possessed by a jinn. He started climbing up walls, defying physics, and nobody could explain what was happening with their family. Her aunt, who was also a small child, all of a sudden goes into a catatonic state and can't talk for a year. One of the other kids in the house, a girl, would go on to have completely unfortunate and terrible luck throughout her entire life. And the final child would eventually pass from a heart attack before being brought back to life. After all this, her grandfather had had enough, and he decided he was going to himself and tried to hang himself. He hung for 10 minutes before someone pulled him down, and he did not pass. Her grandmother calls an imam to the house, which I believe is similar to like a Western priest, and he comes to the house and tells them that she has buried a hex on the property, and he also tells them how to get rid of it. The imam was so precise with where he said that the hex was buried that they found it exactly where he said it was. But she said the curse of death magic was too great for their family, and it's been nearly 100 years of dark magic through their bloodline. She says the witch has now passed, but unfortunate circumstances continue to haunt their family. She says it cannot be removed and her family must live with it. She says although she never met the witch, she sometimes dreams of her dancing around a fire. If anyone has advice for the person who submitted this story, please leave it in the comments. This is a topic unfamiliar to me, but as always, I try to be respectful and just relay the information that was sent to me in the emails. Keep sending me your unbelievable stories. I'll keep adding them to this playlist.
This is one of the most terrifying horror stories I have ever told on this app. Not only does it involve black magic, sihr, and of course jinns, but alongside all of that is the fact that this story is ongoing, and not only that, the story in of itself, it involves so many deaths that this story is something that cannot be joked about. Save this video if you have the guts to watch this at night. Now this story, it actually starts off in the UK, and it starts with one of my closest friends and his family who decide one day that they're gonna go to Pakistan to attend a wedding. Now in the family there is my boy and his 2 sisters and of course their parents. So what happens is in the summer holidays they actually book a flight and they do end up going to Pakistan to attend this wedding. Now while they're actually in the wedding, for those of you who don't know how a Pakistani wedding actually goes, it's one of the most live events that you'll ever see in your life. It's very packed and there are a lot of people. So essentially what ends up happening is my friend's sisters, the older one, essentially what happens is she goes to the side and she goes to just chill out, to be honest. So now she's standing a little bit back from where all the action, of course, where everyone's enjoying themselves essentially. And what ends up happening is one of their cousins, one of their older cousins, actually comes over and starts talking to her. Now to anyone who is unaware, that would seem normal. But unfortunately, this cousin was not a normal cousin. It turns out that this guy was very, very odd, to say the least. What actually ends up happening is this guy ends up asking her for marriage. Bear in mind, this man is over 20 years old. The girl is literally only in year 9. Now this sister clearly clocks that something is wrong. And so the moment that this odd guy asks her straight up, will you get married to me? She licks him across the face. Startled, the cousin actually ends up walking away in shame. And now I could just say the story ended there, but it didn't. Now it actually turns out that my friend's family was staying away from this cousin's family from before. And that's because amongst the family, there were actually rumors that this cousin's family, his mum and his sister and him, were actually involved in a lot of black magic. Not only were they actually dabbling in the arts, they were actually quite experienced in it. And so you can kind of see where this story is going already. A girl has publicly humiliated a man whose family has a history with black magic by slapping him across the face. So essentially what ends up happening is my friend's family actually end up coming back to the UK. And what happens is they decide to move into a new house, basically when they got back. Now of course when the family get back, they actually have to move into this new house. For the first week of them moving into this house, everything seems normal, there's no issues. But once this 1 week mark stops, what ends up happening is a series of unfortunate events. One night my friend is on call with all of us. When I say all of us, I mean the rest of the mandem. All of us on call. Essentially what ends up happening is while he's on call, he starts hearing footsteps in the attic. Bear in mind, it is the dead of night. Not a single person is awake and no one has been making sound beforehand. Now you could say that it was just a squirrel, except that the footsteps were not squirrel-like at all. They were quite clearly of either a human or something very close to a human. Something mimicking a human almost. Alongside that, what ends up happening is my boy actually sees shadows in his room. In fact, he actually also sees his doors opening and closing. But what's crazy is that's not even near the worst part of this entire thing. One night me and my boy are on VC and randomly he leaves the call out of nowhere. I don't know what's happened, I just assume he's gone to sleep. What ends up happening, however, is when he comes back, he doesn't say a single word. He just sits there in call. Now, I'm very confused. I start questioning him, like, where did you go? And he still doesn't say anything. But what he does do is he messages in the GC. Now, I see this and I'm very confused, but I open his message in the GC regardless. What he says is shocking. He says that not only is he unable to speak, but he's unable to get up. And I asked him why. His reasoning was that he felt like something was grabbing his neck, something was physically stopping him from being able to breathe and speak. I ask him why he can't get up and, try to tell someone. He tells me dead straight, it feels like something is sitting on me. It feels like there's someone or something on my knees in the sense I cannot get up physically because this thing is blocking me. Now to me, this is all very concerning, don't get it twisted. But there's one other thing that I'm very curious to find out. And that is why my boy originally left the VC in the first place. Why he actually left Cool. And so I asked him, I said, why did you leave Cool though? When I tell you what he said to me is haunting, I'm being dead serious. This man tells me straight up that his sister has messaged him something. I say, what, was it something important? And he shows me 2 screenshots. In these screenshots, his sister is telling him straight up 3 things. The first, I want to kill you. The second is I want to kill family. And the third is that she wants to kill herself. Instantaneously, I clock whoever is messaging my boy is not his sister. In these scenarios, the best thing that you can do is recite Ayatul Kursi. The millisecond I'm about to start reciting, there's a crash at the door. And in the doorframe is a figure. The figure of a girl. And in her hand, she's holding something. Now, I will be telling more of this story because there is a lot more, but it would get way too long, so I'm going to put it into multiple parts. Regardless though, make sure you follow this account if you want to see more videos like this in your feed.
Another scary story, and this one comes from New Delhi, India. So when I was 11, me and my cousins, who was 13 at the time, visited India and New Delhi like every year. However, this year, our mom decided to take us to the village as me and my cousin have never gone there before. I just know that they regretted their decision after this. We went to the village and immediately got changed into our night suits, so pajamas, as we had reached at 1 a.m. in the morning and needed to go to sleep. My night suit, pajamas, was purple and hers was red. In villages, it is forbidden to wear red as it attracts spirits. But when we were 11, we didn't believe in stuff like this and we were naive and didn't think it was real.
Me and my cousin and her sister, who was 23 at the time, slept in one room and everyone else in another. We thought this would be a fun sleepover type of thing until we started hearing banging noises coming from the outside. We were too scared, but my older cousin told us it's probably the animals outside and there's nothing to worry about. I was too scared, so I went and I slept in the other room with all the adults. However, my 13-year-old cousin and her sister, who's 23, stayed in that room. The next morning, I woke up to screaming coming from the other room, only to hear my aunt screaming at my cousin for wearing red. However, my cousin remained silent, which was odd, and she is not one to keep silent. She usually would argue back. My aunt immediately made her change her clothes, and she did. However, after this, things started to go strange. That day, we decided to visit temples as we had never visited any temples in the village before. The whole journey, my cousin was silent, which was unusual as she is not the quiet type. She's a chatty person. I brushed it off until we reached the temple. Just at the entrance of the temple, she refused to come in. My aunt got angry and held her hand and dragged her in. At that point, my cousin was screaming horrendously and bit my aunt. She was acting like an animal. My aunt jumped and got scared and immediately told us all to go inside and get the priest from the temple. We went inside and told the priest about my cousin's behavior, and he told us he would check if there's anything wrong with her. However, by the time we went outside to get my cousin, she was gone. My aunt was very worried and began to cry, and the whole village went on a search to find her. However, we saw her on the roof of one of the houses. One of the villagers claimed they saw her jump off the roof in one single leap. However, others said she was demanding for water in a very deep voice that did not sound like a girl's voice. My cousin does not have a deep voice at all. She has a very soft voice. By the time my grandma came, she looked very scared and worried. She claimed that my cousin had been possessed. That was pretty obvious, so we called the priest over to conduct an exorcism type of thing. However, my cousin was still missing and was nowhere to be found. We waited for hours searching for her but couldn't find her. Then when the priest finally came, we finally saw my cousin. She looked happy and fine and was acting as if nothing happened. We were confused but happy that she wasn't possessed anymore until it was nighttime. A villager claimed they had seen my cousin on her hands and knees at the water well licking the water. However, we knew she was lying as my cousin was inside the house. So just in case if she wasn't lying, we went back inside the house to see if my cousin was there. And she was. It was time to sleep, so we had to change into her pajamas, night suits again. This time, my cousin was very hesitant to change into her pajamas, night suit. She kept refusing to change into it and wanted to change into a different gown until my aunt grabbed her by the hand, revealing an abnormal amount of body hair. We didn't think much of it, but then my older cousin, her sister, realized that my cousin doesn't have a gown like that. It was an old gown with roses embedded on it. We must not have realized as we were so excited to see her not being possessed. However, clearly something was off. Sitting in the corner was my grandma, who was observing everything. She aggressively pushed my cousin out of the house and started chanting Indian prayers like Hindu mantras. My aunt was furious as my grandma is gentle with everyone. And then my grandma shouted out in Hindi, "Bloody JINN," and pushed her to the ground, revealing her feet that were covered from the long gown. Her feet were backwards, and I started to notice her facial expression started to change. Her skin started to darken. My cousin was a fair girl. Her skin looked almost as if it was burnt in a brutal way. She snarled as she then started to dance horrifyingly, jumping very high and moving about very crazy. This definitely wasn't my cousin. This was a jinn in her form. So the question was, where is my cousin? It turns out that she was in fact possessed and was out and about while this jinn was taking her place. I'm 15 now. My cousin is completely fine now after her exorcism. However, nobody will truly know what happened to her that day. Oh my God, that's so scary. What do you mean she was out and about? Like if the jinn was possessing her body, like I'm so confused. You guys tell me in the comments what you think. Oh my God, so good. Send me more, guys.
This was probably one of the most popular questions I've gotten. A jinn is a supernatural being, and like all beings, human beings, like anything you could think of, werewolves, sprites, they are capable of being good, bad, or neutral. You know, there's polarity in everything that exists. And so it's somewhat like a spirit. And the reason this guy thought that Ryan was a jinn is because, and I think he thought he was a bad one, because he was like, Ryan could not stand the word of God. The roommate, the guy that saw me when I was pregnant, he said that he practiced Islam and his Islamic texts will come up missing. And I don't mean like text message, like books. Whenever he would have his prayer tapes on and Ryan would come into the room, he would like go ballistic and try to take his tapes and destroy them and so forth. So I was just like, well, like, who don't like the word of God? And it's funny because we decided that because I didn't know him that well and we had a baby on the way, me and my roommate were like, we should move him in so we could get to know him better before the baby come. And we had a Quran in the refrigerator and Bibles around the house as well. So both religious texts, because I like to read all that stuff anyways, even though I've never been super religious. Probably within him being there like a few weeks, Bibles, Qurans, everything gone. So I was like, I didn't know what to think, but either way, the baby was coming. The next popular question that people ask is, are your children jinns? You know, I don't know. Jinns have the ability, like I said, to be good or bad. My children are very good. To shapeshift, to be able to like astral project, and also travel between different realms. My daughter does try to astral project. I think she's like accomplished it a couple times, but other than that, I haven't noticed anything about them outside of both of them being pretty clairvoyant. However, that kind of runs in my family anyway. But yeah, and they're super cute. But their daddy was super cute. Is that one of the side effects of being a jinn? I don't know. Gin me up. No. But yeah. So if you guys, and I know a lot of people also wanted to see Ryan. As I said, his name was Ryan Boudreaux. You could Google him actually and just put like biking accident in Chicago and his name, and his picture will pop up. And so you could see him. I did ask my children how they felt about me posting his picture under this, and they both said it was fine, but I don't know. I just didn't do it. So, other than that, yeah, I'm gonna tell you, I was so nervous when, man, I couldn't wait to see that baby come out, because that stayed on my mind the whole pregnancy. Like, am I pregnant with a jinn? Are they gonna come out normal? He didn't come out normal, though. Instead of coming out head first, this kid tried to come out butt first. Sounds pretty jinny to me.
This Uber driver picked up a jinn passenger. Listen to this horrifying story. Tanisha's dad was an Uber driver, but this one incident made him quit. It was around 11 p.m. He was driving and suddenly a weird looking lady stopped his car. This weird looking lady asked him, "Can you drop me somewhere?" But this place would have taken him hours to drive. He was saying no to her. "I can't do that for you." The lady was not taking no for an answer. She pulled out a big stash of money and she showed him. He agreed. She got inside his car, and after a couple of hours, they approached a countryside. He kept asking her how long left, but she kept telling him, "Keep going." Whilst he was driving, he kept looking at the rear view mirror. He couldn't see her reflection, but in the beginning, he didn't make it a big deal. After hours and hours of driving, they finally arrived to their destination, and she said, "This is my mother's house." It was in the middle of nowhere. It looked unusual, but she got out the car and went inside. So he was driving back home. When he looked at the rear view mirror, he saw that she left her jacket. He quickly done a U-turn to return her jacket. He arrived at the house and knocked on the door. The woman's mother opened the door. So the man said to her, "Your daughter left her jacket inside my car," and he gave it to her. The mother looked at him as if he was going crazy. She said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. It's impossible that you have my daughter's jacket. She said my daughter passed away 30 years ago. Upon hearing this, he got so scared and terrified. He went in his car and drove back home so fast. He told his family what happened to him. And then his wife said to him, in fact, that was a jinn. It was not human. And from that day, he quit doing Uber. Subhanallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us.
If you're sensitive to the paranormal world, make sure you protect yourself before you listen to the story, because it does in fact have to do with a jinn. The person who submitted this, of course, wants to be anonymous. This actually happened to her great grandmother, who we're gonna call Alba. Many years ago, Alba, her husband, and 5 kids lived in a small little village located right outside of Uzbekistan. On the property right next to their house, there was this very large hole in the ground that they never really understood what the purpose of it was, and it just sat there for absolutely no reason. Alba got tired of looking at this hole, so she told her husband to cover it up. He went ahead and covered up with dirt and rocks, but soon after he became gravely ill, to the point that he was practically on his deathbed. One day, Alba was sitting next to her husband while he was laying in bed, praying that he would get better, and also wondering how she was gonna make it if her husband passed away, because she would then be left alone with 5 kids. Just then, she heard a loud creak right in front of her house. Now, the front of her house, she had this very large wooden gate that made this unmistakable sound, and she knew that in fact was the loud creak. She decided to look out of the window to see who was coming into her home, when she saw literally the most grotesque, terrifying thing that she had ever seen in her life. It was this woman standing there that looked almost as if she was disfigured. As Alba sat in front of the window, she saw that this woman was walking towards her, and the woman was out of breath, almost as if she had traveled really far to get there. When she gets to Alba, she tells her, "Do you want to know why your husband is so ill? The reason why he's so ill is because he covered that hole. I am in fact a jinn, and that is our entry and exit point. By him covering that hole, he covered up our portal. The only way that he will get better is if he reopens that hole again. But that is not all we want. We now also want a sacrifice, which I'll do a part 2 on, that will be up right after this." This is why you should never watch real exorcism videos, especially when you're by yourself. The story has to do with a jinn. If you guys know anything about jinns, they completely terrify me. And anytime I try to record anything having to do with jinns, I always end up having a lot of technical issues. I have been sitting here for the past 30 minutes trying to get this video out. That just freaked me out. It literally just got really, really quiet, and I heard beeping or ringing coming from this ear, and I could have sworn I heard whispering coming from that way. I'm telling it that it can't stay here. I think I'm gonna tell the story outside. That really freaked me out. It's nice out here anyway, so it's okay. I'm gonna have to burn some Palo Santo in my room later. The person who submitted this wants to be anonymous. I'm gonna go ahead and just read her email. In Islam, we believe that jinns are made out of smokeless fire. When I was 13, I came back from the UK for 3 months with my sister. One night, my mom's cousin's daughter decided to show us real Islamic exorcisms videos on YouTube. This was her way of her trying to entertain us. There was this one particular video that was in black and white, and the moment I saw the video, I automatically felt something. My body automatically went cold. From that moment forward, I couldn't sleep, and I could not be upstairs by myself. I constantly felt like something was watching me. We ended up moving back to Pakistan after 3 years of being in the UK, and the whole time I was in Pakistan, I didn't feel anything. Then one night, my mom put the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and from the moment that video went on the screen, I automatically felt uneasy. All of the feelings that I had felt when I watched that black and white exorcism video automatically came back. I was in the basement one night ironing clothes when the iron continued to shock me. Then out of nowhere, I hear this male voice cackling, almost like it was laughing. At first, I thought maybe it was one of my cousins, but when I checked around the house, there was no one home. There was no explanation as to where this male laughing was coming from.
That's when the whispering began. I want to say that that's what I heard downstairs when I was trying to record this video, her whispering. But she says that's when the whispering began. It wasn't in any particular language, but it just kept whispering in her ear, and she could sometimes even hear it say the words, "Help me." Anytime I would try to read the Quran, I would slur my words, and it was almost like I couldn't focus, and I would get these like flashes in my head of just like very demonic things happening. My dad gave me, I'm gonna put it right here, for protection, but it didn't work. One night I had a dream that I was being dragged by some sort of entity, at which point my family decided to take me to a woman that specializes in jinns, and she said that a jinn had attached itself to me in the UK when I watched that black and white footage. She gave me another one of those, and that one actually ended up working. But years later, she ended up going back to Pakistan. The moment she hit Pakistan, everything started again. The one night she's sleeping, she gets paralyzed and she feels this heaviness on her chest, and she can hear a woman kind of like whispering something in her ear. The next morning, her aunt said that she also had an experience where she woke up in the middle of the night and saw this tall man that wore a turban just standing there staring at his hands, like right in front of her bed. She has never been the same since, but it's been years since she has had an experience. It was a struggle, but she finally found peace, and every day she thanks God for not having any experiences. But this is her words, believe her when she says that sometimes videos online are not just videos, and you should always be very cautious as to what you entertain in your home.
What if I told you there is a hidden code to communicate with the jinn, being said to exist between our world and unseen? Would you dare to learn it? In ancient occult traditions, jinns are the most powerful entities, made of smokeless fire, existing in a parallel realm to humans. While many dismiss them as a myth, secret texts describe a way to communicate with them, but at a great risk. The code of the jinn isn't a single language, but a combination of symbols, vibrations, and intentions. It's said that to summon or bind a jinn, you must first align with their elemental frequency. Each jinn resonates with a unique energy tied to fire, wind, or shadow. One forbidden method involves inscribing sigils under the new moon. These sigils act as gateways, but only if activated by the right incantation. However, ancient warnings state, if the sigil is drawn incorrectly, it could invite chaos instead of cooperation. Another part of the code involves sound. Certain tones, neither human nor musical, are said to attract jinn. These tones, known as phantom frequencies, were whispered among secretive Sufi mystics, but suppressed due to their dangerous potential. But here's the most chilling part. Once a jinn is summoned, the relationship is never equal. They're known as tricksters, often twisting requests to test human greed or arrogance. The real question isn't how to summon them. It's whether you're prepared for what they'll demand in return. So, do you think the jinns are legends? Or could they be the guardians of forbidden knowledge humanity was never meant to access?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you in the mercy and blessings of God. It's amazing to see so many people interested in reading Quran and speaking very highly of it and amazed and blown away by it. It's amazing. God's final revelation to mankind is amazing. But if you just started reading the Quran, you're probably wondering, what is a jinn? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining about when he created Adam, he ordered all of the angels, everybody that was present, to fall prostrate, to bow down to Adam, welcoming him into existence, welcoming him, acknowledging his position. Allah says all of them fell prostrate, all of them bowed except for Iblis. He was of the jinn. Iblis, also known as Lucifer. Satan is not his name. Satan is a title. But I'm going to get into that later. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he was of the jinn, he was not a fallen angel. In Islam, there are three beings that God created. Angels he created from light. Man he created from earth. Jinn he created from smokeless fire. Whatever smokeless fire is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Allahu Alam. He knows. The difference between angels, jinn, and man, only two of those beings have free will. Angels are the oldest beings, the first beings that God created. Jibril being the first. Angels do not have free will. They were created for the sole purpose of carrying out God's commands. That's it. They don't know how to disobey God. If Allah ordered an angel to sit there and count the raindrops until the end of time, guess what? That angel will be standing there counting the raindrops until the end of time. As a matter of fact, they say angel Israfil, which can be translated into Raphael, he's the companion of the trumpets. In other words, he will be the angel that will sound the trumpet, that will cause life to cease to exist. When the end of time, the end of the world comes, Raphael will sound the trumpet by God's command. And it said that he saw angels just to show how they can't disobey their orders. It said that he's standing there with the trumpet to his lips, staring at the throne of God, waiting for him to give him the okay. Scared to even blink. And because of that, they say his eyes have like glossed over. That's how angels work. Jinn have free will. Man has free will. Angels don't. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to create Adam, angels asked him, they said, will you create another who will cause corruption and bloodshed on the earth? Meaning there were already beings on the earth before mankind, which were the jinn. And the jinn were down here cutting up. They were wild. But there's good jinn, there's bad jinn. Throughout time, Hollywood and media and whatnot, they have played around with it into folklore. That's where genies came from. Even if you've seen the old Wishmaster movie, like the chief genie, he was a jinn. All those ideas came from jinn. People have made fun of it. When you get to talking about demons, jinn. When you get to talking about seeing ghosts, jinn. Jinn have long lifespans. Jinn know secrets that we don't know because they know our ancestors. So when the person, oh, my grandma, visited me, that was a jinn. Now, there are good jinn and there are bad jinn. Iblis, aka Lucifer, he was a jinn, and I read somewhere, Iblis was to the jinn what Adam was to man, which was like the first of his kind. He basically had rank amongst the angels to where he can come in heaven and praise Allah in the midst of the angels. So, how did he earn the title Satan, Shaitan? When God ordered them to bow down to Adam, he became the first hater. He said, I'm not going to bow down to him. I'm better than him. He's made of dirt. I'm made of smokeless fire. Surely my creation is greater than his. But it's amazing because Satan believes in God. He believes in Allah. He even prayed to him. He said, please grant me respite until the day that they are raised up. In other words, please don't destroy me just yet. Give me a little time. Let me stay alive. Lengthen my term here. Lengthen my life, and I will show you that they are not worthy of this rank, of this high position that you give them. So when people be like, oh, it's going to be a war of good and evil at the end of the world, it's going to be Satan against God. No. God created him. If he wanted to, he could kill him without lifting a finger. Without anything. He could say a word, he could think it, and he would be dead. Satan, Shaitan, is competing with us to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're not worthy. Allah said, sure, go ahead. Whichever ones you're able to knock off the straight path, I will throw them in hell with you. The term Shaitan, the term Satan, that means distance or far removed. So if you think about it, his name was Iblis or Lucifer. When he disobeyed God, he became Shaitan or Satan, which means far removed or distant. So when he disobeyed God, he became far removed, distant from the mercy of the Most High.